It was supposed to be a wholesome, family-friendly Halloween party. Pumpkin cookies, goofy costumes, and zero drama. That was the plan. But somehow, the kids started asking innocent questions. And within 10 minutes, Aunt Carol was reenacting her disco vampire routine from 1978. Grandpa was bragging about his motorcycle days, and Linda was pretending she didn't once moonwalk in a zombie costume competition. The children were delighted. The adults were terrified. And I, as host, was just trying to keep the caramel corn off the ceiling. So grab your cocoa and stay a while. This is the Halloween party where the skeletons didn't just come out of the closet. They brought photo albums. You ever notice how family gatherings start innocent and then, at some point, drift into, do you remember that one time? Territory? That's how our Halloween party went off the rails. Linda wanted a simple night. Those were her exact words. Just a few decorations, Henry, she said. Nothing extravagant. By sunset, our house looked like a pumpkin patch had exploded. Cobwebs on every corner, a cauldron of caramel corn on the counter, and Daisy, our dog, sitting perfectly still in her skeleton pajamas, staring at the chaos like she was silently judging our life choices. Don't look at me like that, I told her. I didn't pick the glitter pumpkins. Linda was in her element. It's festive, she said, setting out orange cups shaped like mini ghosts. It's also glowing, I said. Is that cup humming? She ignored me. Oh, relax. The family will love it, and right on cue, ding dong. The front door opened to the first wave of Baxters. Greg and Melissa, our son and daughter-in-law, arrived with their kids, Jake, age 10, and Sophie, 8, both in costumes that glowed, beeped, and probably had better Wi-Fi than I did. Grandpa Henry, Jake yelled, trick or treat. You already got candy, I said. You can't trick me. Sophie held up a small pumpkin bucket. We brought you candy. I softened. Ah, that's different. Come in, my favorite grandchildren. Henry, Linda said. They're your only grandchildren. Exactly, I said. Competition's tight. Aunt Carol came next, swanning in dressed as a vampire with rhinestone fangs. Happy Halloween, darlings. I brought bat wings. She handed Linda a tray of suspiciously spicy chicken wings. Carol, Linda said cautiously, these smell aggressive. They're authentic, Carol said proudly. Imported paprika. From where? I asked. My pantry. Behind her was my brother-in-law, Marvin, retired, cheerful, and dressed as a pirate in a leather jacket that creaked like an old floorboard. "Arr, Henry," he bellowed. "Got room for one more buccaneer?" "I'll allow it," I said, "but only if you promise not to bring up the motorcycle story again." He winked. No promises. By 7 o'clock, the house was full. Laughter, candy wrappers, and relatives everywhere. Kids darted between legs. Adults hovered near the snack table. I stationed myself by the punch bowl, the safest place in a crowd that believes moderation is for strangers. It was going well. Too well. Then Jake asked the question. "Grandpa," he said, holding a caramel apple, "what were Halloween parties like when you were a kid?" I hesitated. "Simpler." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Simpler?" "Well," I said, "less safety tape. More creative decision-making." Marvin laughed. "Tell him about the haunted house, Henry." "Marv." "Oh, come on," he said. "The kids will love it." The kids leaned forward, eyes wide. "Haunted house?" Linda groaned. "Oh no, not that story." "Yes, that story," Marvin said. "Picture this, your grandpa, age 15, with more enthusiasm than common sense." "Still true," Linda whispered. "Decides to turn our garage into a haunted house. We charge 10 cents a person." "Wow," Sophie said. "Did people come?" "They came," Marvin said proudly. "They just didn't stay." I sighed. "We used a borrowed mannequin from the clothing store downtown," Linda interjected. "Borrowed is generous. You never returned it." "I meant to," I said. "We just forgot after Mom screamed and locked it in the attic." The kids howled with laughter. "Grandma screamed at a mannequin?" Linda smiled. "It was the 70s. Everything looked haunted." Jake was delighted. "You guys were so weird." "Still are," I said. Then Aunt Carol got that mischievous look she gets before saying something nobody asked for. "Oh, tell them about your high school costume," Linda froze mid-cookie tray. "Carol." "Oh, come on," Carol said. "You were a hit." The kids leaned in again. "What costume?" Linda sighed, setting down the tray. "Fine." It was the 80s. I went to a Halloween dance, dressed as Michael Jackson. Sophie gasped. "With the glove?" Jake's jaw dropped. "Did you dance?" Linda tried to hide a smile. "Maybe a little." Marvin grinned. "A little?" She moonwalked across the entire gym floor. The kids screamed. "Grandma can moonwalk?" "She could," Linda said. "Gravity has opinions now." They begged her to show them, chanting, "Moonwalk, moonwalk," until even Daisy barked. Linda rolled her eyes, stood up, and, to everyone's delight, glided backward across the rug like she'd rehearsed it that morning. The room erupted. "Still got it," Carol cheered. I clapped slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen of Maple Street." Linda bowed. "Thank you. No photos." After that, the dam broke. Everyone started telling stories. Marvin confessed that he once won a pumpkin-eating contest by hiding slices in his pockets. Carol admitted to accidentally gluing her vampire cape to her locker door in 1982. And then, because the children had learned how dangerous curiosity can be, Jake asked, "Grandpa, what about you? What's the most embarrassing Halloween thing you ever did?" I paused. Linda smirked. "Oh, I know that one." She disappeared for a moment and returned with the album. You could hear the adults groan in unison. She opened to the infamous photo, me, age 16, wearing what appeared to be a vampire cape made from a shower curtain, tinfoil fangs, and a haircut that looked like I'd lost a bet with gravity. The kids screamed with laughter. "Grandpa, You look like a villain who got grounded. Linda grinned. He scared no one but the mirror. It was a bold look, I said. I was ahead of my time. Marvin snorted. You were out of your mind. When the stories kept coming, each one louder, funnier, and more revealing than the last. By dessert, everyone was laughing so hard they could barely eat. Even Daisy wagged her tail like she was in on the jokes. At one point, Sophie leaned against Linda and said softly, "You guys used to be like us." Linda smiled. "Still are, sweetheart. Just slower." And there it was, that perfect Maple Street feeling, the house glowing with laughter, the air smelling like sugar and cider, and generations realizing they're all the same kind of silly. I looked around at my family, my glittering wife, and my dog now wearing a stray vampire fang, and thought, maybe the best part of getting older isn't wisdom. It's having a crowd of people who'll still laugh with you, even when the photos come out. The thing about kids is that they can smell weakness. And once they realize you're embarrassed, it's over. After Linda unveiled the album, there was no going back. Jake, still laughing at my teenage vampire photo, leaned over the coffee table and said, "There's got to be more." "More?" I said. "No, that's all." Just one ill-advised costume and a deeply misunderstood sense of style. Linda snorted. "Oh, please, Henry. That's not even the worst one." She flipped a few pages and landed on another gem. Me, age 20, standing proudly beside a scarecrow I'd built out of my father's old coat and an alarming amount of straw. Jake gasped. "What is that?" "That," I said defensively, "is art." Sophie giggled. "Is it supposed to look like you?" "No," I said. But apparently everyone thought it did because my date that year canceled. "Can you blame her?" Aunt Carol said. "You look like you crawled out of a cornfield with opinions." The room exploded with laughter again. Meanwhile, Marvin had helped himself to the punch and was clearly feeling nostalgic. "You know," he said, settling into the armchair, "we used to have real Halloween parties back in the day." "Oh, here we go," Linda muttered. "I'm serious," he said. "We had a live band in the garage one year. The neighbors complained about the noise, but only because we were good." Carol laughed. "Marv, your band was called the Screaming Door Hinges." "It was edgy," he said proudly. Greg, my son, leaned in. "Wait, you were in a band?" "Not for long," I said. "They got shut down after their drummer set off the smoke alarm." "That was an accident," Marvin said. "You were using sparklers as drumsticks." The kid's eyes widened. "That's awesome," Linda groaned. "No, it was dangerous." We had to hide the evidence before their mother got home. Jake whispered reverently, "You guys were legends." I sighed. "We were idiots." "Same thing," he said. At that point, Daisy jumped onto the couch. Technically forbidden, but tonight was clearly a lawless zone, and landed right on the album. It flipped open again, revealing a photograph of Aunt Carol circa 1985, wearing roller skates, a cape, and what looked like several cans worth of glitter hairspray. "Whoa," Jake said. "What is that?" Carol winced. "That was roller disco Dracula." Linda nearly spilled her cider. "You performed to Stayin' Alive." Carol crossed her arms. "It was avant-garde." Sophie giggled. "You look like you got in a fight with a disco ball." "Thank you," Carol said proudly. "That's exactly what I was going for." Marvin shook his head, laughing. "Carol, you had glitter in your hair until Thanksgiving that year." "Worth it," she said. Somewhere between that photo and the one of Linda holding a second-place trophy for Best 1980s Costume, Female Moonwalker Division, the kids made a dangerous discovery: my old shoebox of slides. "Grandpa, what's this?" Jake asked, holding up a dusty box labeled Halloween's 1972 to 1995. "Do not open without snacks." "Nothing important," I said quickly. "Just historical documents." "Historical," Linda repeated, "as in blackmail worthy." Greg smirked. "Oh, I remember those. The projector's still in the attic." "Why do you still have that?" I said. "Because you never throw anything away," he said. Which, in fairness, was true. 5 minutes later, our living room was dimmed, the projector humming, and the walls flickering with images from my questionable youth. Slide 1. Me at age 10, wearing a sheet and tripping over the candy bowl. "Classic," Linda said. "That's the year you scared yourself in the mirror." "I was setting the tone," I said. Slide 2. Teenage me again, standing beside Marvin, who was dressed as a zombie wearing his football pads. "Did you raid the garage?" Sophie asked. "Everything was in the garage back then," Marvin said. "Costumes, tools, hopes." Slide 3. A shot of Linda, young and radiant, wearing a witch costume and standing beside a pumpkin so large it could have had its own zip code. "Oh," Sophie gasped. "Grandma, you look so pretty." Linda smiled softly. "That was the year your grandpa and I met." The room collectively awed. I nodded. "She cast a spell on me." Marvin groaned. "Henry, that line was bad in 1975 and it's worse now." Linda rolled her eyes, but she was blushing. "He wouldn't stop following me around that whole night." "Of course not," I said. "You had the only working flashlight." The laughter softened after that, just a little. For a moment, everyone went quiet, looking at the slideshow, at all those faces frozen in time. Family members who'd moved away, a few who'd passed on, kids who'd grown up. The room felt warm in that nostalgic way, where you can almost hear the echoes of past laughter hiding between the photos. Then Jake broke the silence. "Grandpa, you had hair." And just like that, the mood returned to normal. "Yes," I said, sighing. "Once upon a time, I had majestic, flowing hair." Sophie gasped. "What happened to it?" "Responsibility," I said. "Gravity," Marvin added. "Your father's teenage years," Linda said. The room erupted again. By the time the slideshow ended, The coffee table was littered with cider mugs, cookie crumbs, and laughter. The kids had officially declared the night the best Halloween ever. And honestly, they weren't wrong, because between the jokes and the nostalgia, something lovely had happened. The generations had finally met each other halfway. The kids saw their parents and grandparents not as serious grown-ups, but as the goofy, chaotic dreamers we'd all once been. And us adults? We got to remember what it felt like to be young, fearless, and utterly ridiculous, without a single smartphone in sight. Linda leaned over and whispered, "See, they're learning family history." "History," I said, "rewritten for comedic effect." She grinned. "That's the best kind. You can always tell when a family gathering has hit that magical hour. The snacks are mostly gone. The adults are a little too comfortable, and someone starts a sentence with, "You know, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but..." That was the moment I knew we were entering phase 2 of the evening, the candy bowl confessions. It began innocently enough. The slideshow had ended, the lights were still dimmed, and the kids were lounging on the rug, surrounded by half-eaten caramel apples and the faint smell of cider steam. Daisy snored under the table, having clearly given up on supervising us. Linda was refilling mugs when Aunt Carol leaned back in her chair and sighed dreamily. "You know," she said, "I still can't believe I survived that haunted corn maze back in '83. Marvin nearly choked on his cider. "Oh no. That story?" Jake perked up immediately. "What happened?" Carol smirked. "It was nothing, really. Just a harmless misunderstanding," Linda laughed. "Carol, you ran screaming out of the maze and hid in a hay bale." "I thought the scarecrow moved," Carol protested. "It did," Marvin said. "You ran into a real farmer." The kids screamed with laughter. "I apologized," Carol said indignantly. "He said I scared him." "Of course you did," I said. "You were dressed like a vampire with a glow stick." That opened the floodgates. Greg, my son, decided to jump in next. "Okay, fine. I'll confess something," he said, grinning. "Remember the year we carved pumpkins in the garage?" Linda groaned. "Oh no." "The one where we borrowed your power tools?" "Borrowed?" I said. "Gregory, you and your cousin started a full-scale pumpkin massacre. There was pulp on the ceiling." Jake gasped. "Dad!" "You used Grandpa's drill." "Briefly," Greg said, "until it caught on fire." The kids howled. Linda shook her head, smiling despite herself. "You were lucky I didn't ground me for letting that happen." Greg shrugged. "Hey, I learned about combustion and consequences." "You also learned how to repaint drywall," I said. "Educational evening." Sophie tugged at Linda's sleeve. "Grandma, did you ever get in trouble on Halloween?" Linda hesitated, a sure sign that the answer was yes. "Oh, come on," I said. "Tell them about the pumpkin parade." Her eyes widened. "Henry, no." "Oh, yes," I said, grinning. "The great pumpkin parade of '79. Carol cackled. Oh, this one's legendary. Linda sighed, resigned. Fine. But remember, children, this was before phones, helmets, or logic. She folded her hands and began. Your grandfather and I had just started dating. The town was hosting its first Halloween parade. I volunteered to drive the float for the library, Jake interrupted. You drove a float? She tried to drive a float, I said. She didn't realize the parking brake was still on. Linda glared. We were moving very slowly. So slow, I said, that kids were passing us on foot and waving. Sophie giggled. Did it work? Oh, it worked, Linda said, until Harold attached a fog machine without permission. Harold again, the kids cried. Always Harold, I said. The fog was so thick, Linda continued, that we missed the turn and ended up leading the high school marching band into a Wendy's parking lot. Jake was laughing so hard he rolled off the rug. You paraded into a Wendy's? Yes, she said primly. We took second place for creativity. And by now, the candy bowl had become the unofficial truth serum. Every time someone reached for a chocolate, another story spilled out. Marvin confessed to once toilet papering his own house by accident. Carol admitted she'd been banned from the community center costume contest for using unauthorized pyrotechnics. Greg revealed that he once swapped the labels on his neighbor's candy jars, sugar for salt, to teach him a lesson about bragging. You ruined his fudge, Linda said. He deserved it, Greg said. He told everyone I was afraid of the dark. Were you? Jake asked. Greg hesitated. That's not the point. Eventually, all eyes turned to me. All right, Grandpa, Jake said, smirking. What about your confession? I leaned back, pretending to think. I've lived a very boring, law-abiding life. Boo, the kids chorused. Linda folded her arms. Tell them the truth, Henry. I sighed dramatically. Fine, but you all have to promise not to try this at home. The room leaned in. Even Daisy opened one eye. When I was 16, I began. I tried to build the ultimate Halloween scare. I wanted to make our old maple tree look haunted. Eyes that glowed. Creepy laughter. The works, that sounds awesome, Jake said. It was, I said, right up until I connected the wrong wires. Linda groaned. Oh, not this again. The lights flickered, I said. The speakers screamed and the entire neighborhood lost power for 15 minutes. The room erupted. You caused a blackout? Sophie shrieked. Technically, I said. I created an immersive experience. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. The utility company called him the Maple Street Menace. Hey, I said. The name stuck. By then, no one could stop laughing. The kids were crying into their candy. The adults were leaning on furniture for support. Even Daisy sneezed like she was laughing along. When the laughter finally died down, Linda sighed and smiled at me. You know what's funny? What? I said. These stories sound ridiculous now, but they're exactly why Halloween's always been my favorite. It's the one night everyone stops trying to be perfect. I looked around at the messy table, the glowing decorations, the 3 generations of Baxters still chuckling in the candlelight, and nodded. She was right. Halloween, like family, was best when it was just a little bit messy. Jake yawned, his head resting on Sophie's shoulder. Grandpa? Yeah, kiddo? He smiled sleepily. When I grow up, I want to do stupid stuff like you did. Mission accomplished, I said softly. The kids should have been winding down by then. The candy bowl was mostly wrappers, the cider had cooled, and the clock on the mantel had already ticked past 9. In a reasonable world, that's when you switch on a movie and quietly let the sugar crash do its work. But our family doesn't live in a reasonable world. Jake sat up suddenly, eyes gleaming. Grandpa, he said, can we make our own haunted house? I looked at him over my mug. Right now? Yeah, Sophie said. We have everything we need. Decorations, lights, Daisy as the ghost dog. Daisy, from her spot under the table, gave a single unimpressed bark. Linda smiled sweetly, which meant I was doomed. Oh, Henry, let them have some fun. They'll sleep better after they burn off that energy. Linda, I said, the last time we let them burn off energy, we had to replace the lampshade. They'll be careful this time, she said in her trust the chaos voice. And just like that, I was outvoted. That within minutes, my living room had been declared Maple Street Manor, the spookiest house in town. Jake drew a floor plan on a napkin, labeling areas like Zombie Zone, the hallway, Monster Den, the couch, and Grandpa's graveyard, my recliner. I objected. Why am I the graveyard? Because you don't move much, Jake said. I couldn't argue with that logic. Sophie took charge of props. She gathered every cobweb, candle, and battery-operated pumpkin she could find. The room started to look like the inside of a craft store during a clearance sale. Carol, who'd found her second wind after her 3rd cup of cider, declared herself head of lighting and sound effects. Marvin immediately claimed the title of Chief Scarer. Linda giggled. I'll just make popcorn, she said. I'm not getting involved in this one. You already are, I said. That's your fog machine they're plugging in. She waved me off. It's low smoke mode. Those are famous last words. The kids dimmed the lights. Marvin stood in the corner, trying to look menacing. Carol queued up spooky music on her phone, which came out sounding like Monster Mash, performed through a tin can. All right, Jake announced. We're ready for our first visitor. Grandpa, you go through first so we can test it. I blinked. You want me to be the guinea pig in your haunted experiment? Yes, they said in unison. Linda laughed. Come on, Henry. Be a good sport. Fine, I said, standing up. But if I end up covered in cobwebs, someone else is vacuuming. The lights flickered. The music started, low and warbling, like a ghost trapped in a kazoo. I stepped cautiously into the hallway. From the darkness came Marvin's voice. Boo! It sounded less like a ghost and more like someone startled by their own reflection. I kept walking. Nice try, Marv. Something brushed my arm. A fake spider web. I turned and found Sophie crouched behind the door, flashlight under her chin. "Welcome to your doom," she said dramatically. "Creative," I said. "I give it 8 out of 10. She pouted. "You're supposed to scream." "I'm a tough audience." Then from the living room came the unmistakable hiss of the fog machine. "Oh no," I muttered. In seconds, a thick cloud began to pour into the hall. "Carol!" Linda yelled from the kitchen. "How high did you turn it?" "I don't know," Carol said. "It just said festive level." "Festive for who?" I coughed. The fog filled every corner of the room. Daisy started barking, her tail wagging wildly as she chased the mist like it was an enemy. From the haze, Jake's voice shouted, "It looks awesome!" "It looks like my insurance deductible," I shouted back. Linda waved a dish towel, trying to fan the air. "Turn it off." "I can't see the switch," Carol said, "because you're standing in a cloud." By now, the entire family was wheezing, laughing, and bumping into furniture. The lights from the glowing pumpkins created weird shadows across the walls, making the whole house look like a carnival funhouse. Marvin tripped over the extension cord. The fog machine sputtered one last defiant whoosh, and then went mercifully silent. When the mist finally began to clear, the living room was a disaster. The curtains were damp, the cobwebs drooped like tired ghosts, and Daisy emerged from under the couch looking like she'd run through a flower factory. Linda was doubled over laughing. "Oh, Henry," she said between gasps. "It's perfect." "Perfect," I said. "We nearly summoned the local fire department." "Everyone's fine," she said. "And look, the kids are having the time of their lives." She was right. Jake and Sophie were grinning ear to ear, still giggling as they adjusted their decorations. Carol and Marvin were laughing too, leaning on each other for balance. Even Greg and Melissa, who'd been filming the whole thing, were snickering behind the camera. I sighed, shaking my head. We can't go one Halloween without a near-death experience. Linda handed me a mug of cider. "But admit it, it's kind of magical." I looked around at the smoky room, the glowing pumpkins, the family laughing through the chaos, and couldn't help but smile. "Yeah," I said softly, "haunted, but magical." The 10 minutes later, the fog machine was safely unplugged under strict adult supervision, and the kids were parading their haunted house set up for the grown-ups. Jake stood proudly by the hallway entrance. "Tickets are free," he said, "but donations of candy are accepted." "Spoken like a true entrepreneur," I said, tossing him a mini Snickers. As the last tour ended, Linda clapped her hands. "All right, ghosts and goblins, time for our annual family photo." The group groaned. "Oh, come on," she said. "Tradition." So we gathered in front of the fireplace, foggy backdrop and all, and squeezed together. Marvin adjusted his pirate hat. Carol struck a vampire pose. Greg held Daisy like a baby ghost, and Linda leaned into me, eyes sparkling. "Say boo," she said. "Boo!" we all shouted. The camera flashed, and for one perfect second, it caught everything. The laughter, the mess, the madness, and the love. If there's one thing I've learned about Halloween, it's that it brings out the inner 10-year-old in everyone. Sometimes without warning, and almost never with adult supervision. By the time we finished taking that foggy, glittery, barely in focus family photo, I thought we'd finally reach the calm, let's all digest our caramel corn part of the night. I was wrong. Jake was the first to say it. "Grandpa," he said, rummaging through the hall closet, "what's in this box?" Linda and I exchanged a look. Oh no, the costume box. That box had survived 4 moves, 2 basement floods, and 1 incident involving mothballs and regret. It was a time capsule of questionable decisions and polyester nightmares. "Leave that alone," I said quickly. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Sophie asked, already lifting the lid. A faint smell of dust, rubber, and nostalgia escaped. Jake's eyes went wide. "Whoa! Grandpa, did you wear this?" He pulled out my old 1970s vampire cape, technically a repurposed shower curtain with duct tape trim. "Yes," I said solemnly. "And it was magnificent." Linda laughed. "You looked like a bat who'd lost its job." "Still got more style than Marvin's pirate jacket," I said. "Hey," Marvin shouted from the couch. "That jacket's vintage." "Vintage mildew," Carol muttered. In about 2 minutes flat, the kids had dumped the entire contents of the box across the living room floor. There were plastic masks with elastic strings, sequined hats, a tutu from who knows where, and a pair of fake fangs that had definitely seen better decades. Sophie squealed. "Let's do a costume swap. The kids wear the old grown-up costumes, and the grown-ups wear ours." Linda gasped. "Oh, that sounds fun." "Fun," I said. "Or humiliating." Carol clapped her hands. "I'm in." Marvin grinned. "I'll need a minute to stretch first." And before I could stage a peaceful protest, the entire living room turned into a changing room. 5 minutes later, the chaos was complete. Jake emerged first, wearing my old vampire cape, sunglasses, and one of Linda's scarves. "I am Count Baxter," he declared in his deepest possible voice. Sophie followed, wearing Linda's witch hat that drooped dramatically over her eyes. "Double, double, something in trouble," she chanted. Linda smiled proudly. "Oh, you look adorable." Then the adults made their entrance. Marvin appeared wearing Jake's glow-in-the-dark skeleton shirt, stretched so tight it looked like the skeleton was fighting for its life. Carol had somehow squeezed into Sophie's fairy wings, which were not built to withstand 1980s enthusiasm. And Linda, oh Linda, she'd put on Jake's superhero mask backward. "Can I see out of this?" she asked. "Barely," I said. "What about you, Henry?" Marvin asked. "Your turn." I looked down at what was left in the costume pile, a child-sized ghost sheet and Daisy's spare pumpkin sweater. No, I said. Yes, Linda said. The children insist, Daisy barked in agreement. 10 minutes later, there I was. A grown man standing in the middle of my living room, wearing a crooked bed sheet with eye holes and a dog sweater around my neck. The family lost it. Jake fell on the carpet laughing. You look like a confused marshmallow. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. Oh, Henry, perfect as always. Remind me to revisit my life choices, I said. R.T. Once the laughter settled, slightly, Jake had another idea. Let's do a fashion show. Absolutely not, I said. Already filming, Greg announced, phone in hand. The kids set up a runway made of couch cushions and Halloween lights. Marvin was volunteered as the announcer. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, welcome to the first annual Maple Street Halloween Catwalk. Tonight's theme, questionable choices through the ages. The first contestant, Sophie as Grandma's Glamorous Witch. She strutted down the makeshift runway, tripping once on Daisy's tail but recovering with flair. 10 out of 10, Marvin declared. Next up, Jake as Count Baxter, Lord of Snacks, complete with a candy wrapper cape. 11 out of 10 for sugar commitment, Carol shouted. Then came the adults. Carol twirled, scattering fairy glitter everywhere. Still got it, she said. Linda did her best superhero pose, which would have been more convincing if she hadn't immediately bumped into the lamp. And then, of course, it was my turn. I shuffled onto the runway in my ghost sheet, Daisy trotting beside me in matching pumpkin attire. Marvin played dramatic organ music on his phone. Behold, he said, the ethereal marshmallow. I waved slowly, like a ghost whose haunting shift was nearly over. Jake shouted, "Bootiful!" Even Linda was laughing too hard to breathe. Henry, you're adorable. Adorable wasn't the goal, I said, trying not to trip over the sheet. Intimidating was. You missed that exit about 3 decades ago, Marvin said. I gave him my most serious ghost glare, which unfortunately looked more like a man trying to find his glasses. Chengdui. By now, the laughter was infectious. Nobody cared that the runway was collapsing or that the decorations were half falling off the walls. The kids were chanting, "Encore, encore," and the adults were laughing like it was the best night of their lives. Linda, cheeks pink from laughter, held up her cider. To family. To fashion disasters, Carol added. To ghosts who need better tailoring, Marvin said, gesturing at me. I raised my mug. To knowing exactly who you are, I said, and still showing up in a sheet. The kids clinked their juice boxes against our mugs. Daisy barked in agreement. And in that golden, ridiculous moment, I realized something. It wasn't just a costume swap. It was proof that no matter how much older we got, we'd never outgrow the joy of being silly together. And that, my friends, was our Halloween night. Part 1 of what can only be described as the Baxter family's descent into festive madness. We started with cookies and costumes, and ended with a fashion show featuring a ghost in a dog sweater. But believe it or not, the night wasn't over. because just when we thought the chaos had settled, something else happened. Something that made our haunted fog fiasco look downright ordinary. So, if you enjoyed this little family disaster, grab your cocoa and stay tuned. Part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, it gets even spookier.